Part 1. The Vacation. The movie begins with Richard and Jen flying in a helicopter to their vacation in a remote luxury house in the middle of nowhere. Getting off the helicopter, the pilot hands Richard some drugs. Jen, in her sexy outfit, gets into the bedroom and gives Richard a fellatio. Richard is a rich married man who toys with young beautiful girls like Jen every now and then. The next day, Jen walks to the kitchen in her underwear and gets an apple. She is scared to see two men standing behind the glass and staring at her. They are Stan and Dimitri, Richard's friends who have arrived a day earlier than they were supposed to for their hunting trip. Richard introduces Jen as just his friend. As Jen leaves the men, Stan and Dimitri continue to stare at her body. Later that night, they partied by the pool. Jen and Stan strike up a conversation while Dimitri is looking at her with his binoculars. The guys see the drugs, a strong local hallucinogen, with Richard. He gives it to Jen to hide it somewhere safe, saying that it is too strong to be consumed. Jen puts it in her locket and gets back to dance with Richard. When Richard says that he will not dance, she picks Stan up and erotically dances with him. Stan is enjoying the flirtatious Jen dancing with him. Richard then comes and takes Jen to his bedroom. Part 2. The Rape. The next morning, Jen wakes up alone. She finds Stan, who has prepared breakfast on the porch. Stan informs Jen that Richard has gone to submit their passports and that it will take all morning. Jen seems a bit uncomfortable with Stan staring at her. She goes to pack and take a shower. While Jen is putting on some clothes, she notices that Stan has been watching her all this time. Stan starts an awkward conversation while sitting beside Jen on the bed. He asks Jen to meet him whenever she can and do a thing or two with him. Jen says that he likes taller men and that Stan is not her type. Stan then proceeds to say that he has not changed since the previous night, when she was throwing herself at him. Jen walks away, and a creepy Stan follows her. He blocks her escape and starts touching her. When Jen protests, Stan becomes aggressive. Dimitri sees them both, and Stan tells him to either wait for his turn or leave the room. Dimitri leaves the room, and on his way to the living room, he hears Jen screaming and shouting. Dimitri turns the TV on to suppress her screams and goes to the pool. Stan continues to rape Jen. Later, when Richard comes back, Stan tells him that there is a problem with Jen. Richard comes to Jen, who is lying on the bed and sobbing. An angry Richard goes to Stan, shouts at him, and rhetorically asks what the hell is wrong with him. Getting back to Jen, he offers her a job. Jen asks him to call the helicopter. When Richard says that it is not possible, Jen threatens to call his wife and tell her everything. Richard then slaps Jen and warns her not to ever threaten him. Jen stands up and starts to run. Richard follows her, and Stan and Dimitri join him on this pursuit. A barefooted Jen runs all the way to the edge of a cliff. The guys catch her there. With nowhere to run, Jen panics. Richard tries to calm her and supposedly calls his pilot to pick her up immediately. Jen relaxes and believes in Richard. Richard gets close to Jen, and all of a sudden, he shoves her off the cliff, leaving her to die. Jen falls on a tree, and a tree stump goes through her abdomen. When Stan asks Richard why he did that to Jen, Richard responds that she could have sent them all to prison for at least 15 years. Richard tells the guys that they will clean things up on their way to hunting. Part 3. The Phoenix. The guys prepare for their hunting game. Richard burns all of Jen's belongings at the villa. Jen has miraculously survived. She has lost a lot of blood and is still stuck on the tree. Her survival instincts activate. She sees her lighter blow and grabs it to light a fire. The tree is bone dry, and with little struggle, Jen sets it on fire to free herself. The burned tree quickly collapses, and Jen finds herself on the ground, burned but alive with a tree stump still stuck through her abdomen. She hears the noise of approaching vehicles. Sensing that Richard and his party must have come after her, she drags herself to the edge of the rock to hide. The guys reaching the cliff's edge look down to see if Jen is still there. Not finding her, they panic and rush to get to the location. By the time the guys reach the location, it has already become dark, and Jen is long gone. The guys see the blood trail that Jen has left. They quickly concluded that she must not be that far away. They follow the trail and reach the bank of a river. Stan stays by the river in his Range Rover, and Richard and Dimitri ride in two directions to find Jen. Dimitri parks by the riverbank and takes a piss. Jen, seeing that, moves towards him and gets his gun. Pointing the gun at Dimitri, she fires only to find out that it is not loaded. Dimitri punches her and tells her that no idiot would leave his gun loaded. Dimitri then tells his team that he has found Jen and will take care of her. Stan is finally relieved and plays a song from Jen's iPod. Dimitri then proceeds to drown Jen and sadistically tells her that it is his best mode of killing his prey. Jen notices Dimitri's knife on his belt. She takes that and stabs Dimitri in both eyes, killing him quickly. She then pulls the knife out of his eye, gets on his ATV bike, and rides through the wilderness. After a long and tedious ride, the bike runs out of fuel before actually getting Jen anywhere she could get help. Jen leaves the bike and moves on, carrying Dimitri's gun and backpack. She finds a cave and starts a fire. Emptying the backpack, she finds a beer can and drinks it all. She tries to get the tree stump out of her abdomen but fails due to the excruciating pain. She starts sobbing and notices her locket. She remembers the drug that she put in it. She takes the hallucinogen and eats it. Soon, Jen starts to hallucinate from hearing classical music to strange voices. Jen proceeds to take the tree stump out of her abdomen by cutting her belly wide. She cauterizes the gash with the beer can, which she has cut open and unfurled into a metal bandage warmed over the campfire. This ends up branding a phoenix logo across her belly and sealing her wound. The next morning, Stan wakes up to Richard throwing his kill on his Range Rover's windshield. Richard tries to contact Dimitri, but he is unresponsive. Stan goes to wash his face and refresh by the riverbank. He screams and falls into the river when he sees a dead Dimitri resurfacing in the river. They both realize that Jen must have killed Dimitri. Richard takes Dimitri out of the river and fills his pocket with heavy rocks. They both then throw back Dimitri's body into the river. When Stan questions Richard and tells him it was all his fault for throwing Jen off the cliff, Richard punches Stan and breaks his nose. Richard and Stan hit the road to find Jen. After a long ride, they find Dimitri's ATV bike left in the middle of the desert. Jen continues to hallucinate. She has lost track of time and is in a dreamlike state. She finds herself shot in the face by Richard and sees Dimitri and Stan. She hears their voices and her own screams while she is raped. At last, she wakes up and prepares herself for the final showdown. Part 4. The Revenge. Jen gets out of the cave and searches for Richard and Stan. She finally sees Stan driving towards a mountain. A resolved and reborn Jen geared up with a gun and knife follows Stan to the mountain. She finally finds Stan refueling his Range Rover. Hiding behind a rock, she aims and fires, hitting Stan in the shoulder. A screaming and shouting Stan leaves the spot. Jen follows him with the intent of killing him. They are both on foot. Jen follows the blood trail that Stan leaves behind. Realizing that, Stan takes off one of his socks and ties his wound. He proceeds with one shoe only. Hiding up in the mountain, he sees Jen passing by. He then gets down and follows Jen, aiming at her with his rifle. He shoots and hits Jen's right ear. Jen falls down but quickly gets up and runs for her life. Stan shoots multiple rounds but misses her. Running after Jen, he stumbles over broken glasses left as a trap by her. The glass cuts his right foot deep. He agonizingly takes out the glass from his foot and gets back to his car. Driving like a lunatic, he sees Jen on the road and speeds up. Jen takes aim and fires at him. She fires multiple rounds and hits Stan in the face, killing him instantly. Jen throws Stan's body and gets in the car. Richards gets back to the location where he and Stan were supposed to regroup. After waiting for so long, he finally realizes that Stan might not come back. He gets on his bike and rides towards his villa. He reaches the villa the next morning, exhausted and frustrated. He calls his pilot to pick him up in 30 minutes. Once his return trip is confirmed, Richard goes to take a shower. While in the shower, he hears noises. A naked Richard gets out of the bathroom with his rifle and searches his villa. When Richard relaxes after finding nothing, he notices Jen with her rifle aimed at him. He attempts to run and hide, but Jen hits him in the stomach. Richard gets injured and bleeds heavily. However, he is still alive and adamant about getting Jen. Jen fires multiple rounds but misses Richard. A game of cat and mouse begins as they both chase each other through the villa. Running after Richard, Jen slips and falls over his blood. Richard gets to her and clubs her with his rifle's butt. Richard picks up Jen and chalks her. Jen, seeing Richard's wound, fists it hard. They both collapse and Jen gets her rifle. Richard jumps on Jen and she fires the final round, killing Richard instantly. Jen stands up, soaked in Richard's blood, and walks to the edge of the pool. She finally seems at ease and hears a helicopter approaching. She turns and gives a deadly gaze. Part 5. The Verdict. Revenge is an intense and often excruciating movie to watch. It is visually a testosterone-fueled dream that transitions into a bloody nightmare. The movie displays a masterful balance of tone and pacing. After a quarter of the movie, it becomes a heart-pounding chase, where the roles of the prey and the hunter shift rapidly. The intense action and suspense are arresting if you have the stomach to watch its most garish moments of violence. Revenge is more about transformation and transference than revenge. This was our recap and verdict. Tell us what you liked or disliked about this movie. Let us know in the comment section what movie we should recap next. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified when we upload new videos and enjoy watching.